Hi everyone and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're talking about pizza. Now before you click off and say, I am not the guy you would normally go to for pizza, I will tell you that I'm going to show you what I think is sort of a foolproof way to approach it with lots of ins and outs. And then I'm going to give you what you're looking for when you come to my stuff. I'm going to give you the flavors of Mexico, but on a pizza with tomatillo salsa, some goat cheese, some bacon, a little queso añejo and cilantro over the top. This has been our family pizza for decades and decades, and I guarantee you once you make it, it will become your family pizza as well. Okay, so what do we need to know about pizza to make it good? I'm going to give you the stuff that's going to give you a really very good pizza. Some of you are the pizza geeks out there, and you will want to take it to another level so that you can get the most memorable pizza you've ever had in your life. That takes a lot more than what I'm usually willing to go through when I am cooking for my family at home. So what I'm going to do is take you to that very, very good pizza. But as we go through this, I'm going to point out some of the things that will take it to the next level. So the first thing that we have to talk about is the ingredients for the dough. And I'm starting here with flour that I have measured out. And you can see that it is on a scale here, because measuring flour without a scale is always going to be a hit or miss kind of proposition, because the way you pack it into the volume measures, the cups, you can pack way more in or not very much in, meaning that you really literally have different quantities of flour. So this is about 4 1/3 cups of flour. If you sort of stir the flour up, put your dry measure into it, sweep it off the top, leveling it, and that will give you about 4 1/3 cups of that. But if you put it onto a scale, I've got 607 grams here. You can get that specific when you're using one of these inexpensive scales that are incredibly easy to find these days. So if you do any baking, I suggest you get one of these scales. So I've got that measured out. Now, what kind of flour is it? Usually the best pizzas will be made with something that's like all-purpose flour, but one that has a higher protein concentration in it, more gluten in it. And so if you choose the King Arthur brand, then you're going to be at almost that 12% protein. You can look right on the bag and see where that is. But any all-purpose flour will kind of work for this, but the higher the gluten content for your all-purpose, the better the puff will be and the more chew you will get in your pizza, which is something that I'm going for. Now you'll notice that this is King Arthur, but it says double O on it. That's the absolute finest ground version of this all-purpose flour, and I'll tell you, it will give you a really beautiful looking pizza crust. Not all the stores carry this, but you can easily order it online if you want to take that next step up. Okay, so we've got that measured out. Now let's go to the other very, very simple ingredients. So we've got water, yeast, salt, and I'm going to put olive oil in here. I'm working with just room temperature water here, and I've got 1 2/3 cups. Again, if you were just going to weigh it out here, you would go to 364 grams, and that would give you exactly the right amount of hydration for this much flour. I'm going to put in this instant instant yeast you could use, or any kind of granulated dry yeast you could put in here. I'm not going to delve into that. There's lots to say about it, but for all intents and purposes, just take a package of the yeast and put it in here. If you've got, this doesn't measure small amounts very well, but if you have a jeweler's scale, again, this is totally geeky, you would measure out 9 grams of the instant yeast, or the active dry yeast. And then I'm going to put into the water also 4 teaspoons of salt here. Now that's 4 teaspoons. I'm using the diamond crystal salt here, which has a slightly different volume than other salts do, but I find this works really well with 4 teaspoons of that. And then I am going to whisk that until I see that it's dissolved. That's what I'm looking for, is just to dissolve those two things in this yeast. Okay, I've been whisking this now for about a minute or so to make sure that it is well dissolved, and then pour that in with the flour there. Nothing, no residue at all at the bottom. I've got a 1/4 cup of olive oil that I'm going to put in, which I think makes a more crackly crust, crackly crisp crust, and I like that a lot. And then just with a large spoon, I'm going to stir all of this stuff together. And once I have stirred it together, it'll look sort of like a shaggy mass. That's what that first stage will be. And just look down in here now, and you can see what this looks like. It doesn't look completely like it's come together yet. There's a little bit of dry stuff still on the bottom of the bowl there. But this is the moment that I just walk away from it. Let it sit for 4 or 5 minutes, and you'll start to get more rehydration of that dry flour, and it'll start to come together a little bit more. I'll meet you back here in, say, 4 or 5 minutes. Let's look at this dough now. I'm just going to put it out here on the countertop. You can see why I call it shaggy looking there. It hasn't really come together. Now, you have 2 options at this point. You can knead it with a machine or by hand. I'll show you, if you're going to be doing it by hand, what the kneading process is like. I like to kind of roll it back and forth like that, turning it at 90 degrees each time, a 1/4 of a turn. And then once I start to feel that it's gotten sort of sticky, meaning that all of the dough has, all of the flour has been rehydrated, I'll sprinkle a little bit of flour over the top of it. Underneath it and over the top of it on both. And then I'll start what I consider to be the real kneading of this. And this would go on for like 10 minutes or so. So it's fold the dough down on itself like that, and then press away as you go like that. Turn it a 1/4 turn, fold it back over itself, and then press away from you and out. Okay, so you're stretching the strands of gluten that are in this dough, and we want it to look very smooth, and we want it to look very, very silky. Okay, it doesn't look like that now. That would take about 10 minutes, or for those of you that have a stand mixer with a dough hook on it, you can just put this in here. I've got the dough hook already attached, and then I'm going to just turn it on about a medium to medium low speed, and we'll let the dough hook do this. Again, we're going to go probably 8 to 10 minutes on this until it looks very smooth and very elastic. Okay, I don't know if you can see exactly how different it looks, but it looks like one smooth, homogeneous hunk of dough right now. And you can also see that it's completely coming away from the sides of the bowl. And for about the first 5 minutes of the kneading by machine here, it was completely stuck to the edges. It was just moving around. That means that we have developed a lot of gluten here. This is about 9.5 minutes or so. So I'm going to turn this off and take the dough off of the dough hook like that. Now this is a pretty, what we would call hydrated dough, so it's going to be kind of sticky. But you can see if I just dump this out, I will need to put it on some flour here so that it doesn't stick, because it's a sticky dough. And also, when you're getting it out, if you just dip your hand into the flour container, it will come out much easier that way. And then just bring it out. You're not going to do this. You're going to leave it in the bowl. But if you have been kneading it by hand, and that's what I wanted to show you here. If you have been kneading it by hand, you want to knead it until it looks like this. Just see how much smoother it looks. And it's super elastic. It holds together really, really beautifully. Okay? Now to the rise. I always start this the day before I want to use it. At this point, I would cover it with plastic wrap and put it into the refrigerator and just let it rise overnight. And about 2 hours before baking the pizzas, you would take it out of the refrigerator and dump it out. I've got one that has risen like that, and I want to show you what that's like. This was covered with plastic wrap, which always tends to stick to it. So I kind of gather it up like that, and then we'll put that over here to the side. Again, with a floured hand, I'm going to take this out. I'm also at that same time deflating it. You can see how it has trapped all of the bubbles from the yeast in there. So I'm just very gently pulling it out and giving it a little bit of flour on the top. This is such a beautiful dough to work with. Okay, so the next step that we have to take is to divide it into dough balls. And I find the easiest one to work with is dividing it into 6 pieces here, so that this would make 6 sort of about 12-inch pizzas. This is one of the most useful pieces of equipment you can have in the kitchen because you can scrape things out of the bowl with it, or you could use it just to cut things up here. I'm going to cut this in half and then cut each half into about thirds. This is another place here where you could easily use your scale. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, this is going to be much smaller than this one, so I'm going to take a little piece off of that first one there. So let's roll them into balls next. It's a very easy thing to do. Lots of people online you'll see do this kind of thing where they're tucking it under. But this is actually a trick that I learned in Mexico for making conchas, the little streusel-topped rolls that they have there. And that is to cup your hand over the top of it and give gentle pressure to it as you roll it around. Now, if you put too much flour, it'll just slide. But if you have just a little bit of flour on there that gets absorbed, you'll see that it creates a beautiful sphere like that. One more time, I'll show you that. So you just cup your hand over the top of it. I should probably have just a touch more flour on my hand like that. And you just start rolling around. Now you saw it slip there because it has too much flour on it. But as that flour gets absorbed in here, then I will be able to feel it catching a little bit and be able to give it a little bit more pressure. And this will produce a beautiful ball, but that needs a little bit more. I could see that it wasn't really very together on one side, so that's that. Okay, after you have done all of the dough balls, then we're going to let these rise for a couple of hours as we get all of the ingredients together for the toppings. Okay, just a second before we go on to the toppings here, I forgot to tell you a couple things. One is that we're going to let these rise again. So I'm putting them on some parchment paper here, or you could just lightly flour your baking sheet and put them on that. Lightly flour them on the top too, because I would cover these with plastic wrap and then set them aside at a regular room temperature for them to warm up to room temperature and then have the opportunity to rise a second time. So I'm going to set these guys over here, but I wanted to talk about why I start the dough the night before, because that's really a big deal that you've done that. So for me, starting it the night before develops so much more flavor. There are people that will start their dough 3 or 4 days in advance so that it actually takes on a kind of sour quality, that sourness of sourdough bread. And so a lot of people like that. I'm doing this without sourdough starter, but at least I have let it to mature, I will say, overnight in the refrigerator. And that's just the simplest way that you could do it. Now, on the days that I don't get it started the night before, what I do is just start it in the morning and just let it sit at room temperature for 5 or 6 hours until I get ready to make the pizzas. Okay, so now it's on to the toppings. As promised, this is a roasted tomatillo salsa pizza. I have the roasted tomatillo salsa already made here. I've done a number of videos showing you how to do that, so you can search YouTube for that. We've got some crumbled goat cheese here. This is the Mexican queso añejo, and over in this towel is the cilantro. Now, since it's the height of the summer, I went to the farmer's market and I got some patty pan squash, which I roasted here, and I grow a lot of squash, so I harvested some of the male blossoms off of that we could use on the final decoration of this pizza. But bacon is one of the essential parts of it to me. Now, it's delicious without it, and I have done that when I've been feeding a bunch of vegetarians, but I will say that I really love it with bacon on it. So I'll show you how I'm going to get to that bacon part of it. I've got bacon. This is the bacon that we get hickory smoked from the guy who does all of our pork, Greg Gunthorpe, and all the pork for our restaurant. And I'm going to chop it into thin strips here, about, well, less than 1/4 of an inch. And I'm showing you this because this is the way I like to cut up bacon and cook it if I'm going to use it more as a flavoring or a crunchy topping on something. So I'm cutting crosswise here, and then I'm going to put it into a pan that I have already heated. And I've got it over medium high. Now, a lot of you probably have your own special ways of cooking bacon, and I would suggest that you follow those. But this will just show you another alternative here. So all of this bacon is going to go into this preheated pan. You can hear it start to sizzle immediately here. And spread it out so that it's in an even layer. And then I'm going to, with a spatula here, just start to move it around. Now, this is the way that I cook bacon, over medium-high heat, not low heat, as most recipes will tell you, when I want beautiful, crunchy little pieces. This will take several minutes to cook, but you can't walk away from it because we're working over a much higher heat, which will give us beautiful browned quality and really delicious flavor, but you have to kind of keep it moving. After about a minute, it will have rendered a lot of fat, and then I really start stirring it as it finishes cooking and crisps and browns. Okay, this is done to the stage I want it to be. You can see that it has really changed colors a lot. It looks beautifully browned. And I'm collecting it all up here, and with a slotted spoon, I'm going to drain it on paper towels. Okay, and don't forget to pour that, once it's cooled down, into an airtight container and keep it in your refrigerator. It's the perfect thing to saute onions or potatoes or what have you in. Okay, now we've got all of our ingredients ready here to go on to the making of the pizzas. So I'm going to show you one of those guys and how I do that. A pizza peel is really very useful for this, or you could use a cookie sheet with no sides on it. That you can use that. I'm going to take one of the balls of dough here that has risen for a couple of hours, put it on a lightly floured board, and then give it a little bit of flour over the top as well. Now, there's several different ways that you can do this. You could use a rolling pin if you want to. It won't be quite so puffy on the rim when you do that, but it's totally fine. You could do that, or you could press it out with your fingertips, as I did on that one. Just use your fingertips to make it into a round. And then I do it over the back of my wrists a lot of times, letting it hang down, and then just constantly be turning it between the hands like that, and allowing the weight of the dough itself to kind of stretch out. And then when you get it to be about that 12-inch size, let's see what this looks like. It's almost to a 12-inch. That's 8 inches, so it's almost to the 12-inch size. And we want it to be pretty thin on the inside and a little thicker on the outside. I'm going to just lightly dust this peel with the flour and lay the dough on that. Give it one last little stretch here. And then I always do this. I make sure that it is moving free. It's not sticking anywhere there. So our next thing here is going to be to put the toppings on it. It'll take about 1/3 cup of this roasted tomatillo salsa. It's just a thin layer of it on there. So we'll start with those 3 really big spoonfuls like that. And we want to take it to within 1/2 inch or so of the edge of this dough. I could use just a touch more over here. A lot of times people want to load it up with a lot of the sauce or salsa that they're using on the pizza. That never turns out very good at all. Now we're going to put on the goat cheese, about the same quantity. It'll be about 1/3 cup of the goat cheese that goes on here. And I like to just break it into little pieces. These will soften during the baking, but they don't really completely melt. But I want to evenly distribute that over the top here. Now, because I have this roasted patty pan squash here, I'm going to use that, but you don't have to. Or you could chop up some poblano peppers that have been roasted. Those are really delicious on this kind of pizza. I just kind of go from one thing to another, and then sprinkle the bacon over the top of that. And it's looking really good already. Make sure that it will move on the peel, and now we're ready to go to the baking. Now, what most of you are going to have access to, pretty easy access to, is a baking stone. I put one in the oven on the lowest rack, and then I set the oven to 500 degrees, and I let that warm up for 45 minutes to an hour. Now, I want to make sure that the pizza is sliding free on the peel, and I'm going to actually get it off by doing this thing, letting it go off a little bit, and then right at the very end, pulling the peel out. I'm going to close up the oven, and this will take 4 or 5 minutes to cook. And then I've got another surprise for you, another way to bake the pizza. Sliding the peel right underneath it, the beautiful pizza here. I'm going to put it right out on that one. Now, the toppings for it, after it comes out of the oven, are the añejo cheese. And then I've got these squash blossoms here. For those, you just pull the little sepals off the outside, release this center part there, and then just tear it open. Got that little pistil there. And then just tear this into ribbons and lay them on the top. They don't have a ton of flavor, but they sure are beautiful. And if you find them at your farmer's market, definitely give that a try. Last little thing here is a handful of cilantro leaves to just fall over the top of it. And there is version 1. Okay, this is what I brought you out here to show you. This is one of those great new pizza ovens, and I know a lot of you have them. This is the Uni, and you know what I really love about it is that it can heat up to really high temperatures in about 20 minutes. You can see that this one's at 760 degrees, way hotter than I can ever get my oven inside. And the other thing that's great about it is it's got this flame that just shoots right across the top, meaning that you can brown the top of the pizza way better than you can in the oven. So again, I will make sure that this has got some sliding around properties and do the exact same thing that I did inside, which is to let it go off a little bit and then just pull it out. And then we're going to close the door here, and where the other one takes like around 8 minutes or so to bake, this one will be done in 2. It's been about a minute or so, and now I'm going to just go in here and I'm going to turn it around. It's a little bit, when you watch the pizza guys do this, it always looks like there's absolutely nothing to it, but I like to just kind of turn it around so that it can evenly cook, move it back into the oven, and then we'll let it go for another minute or so. looking mighty good right now. Just look at how beautifully browned that is. I like those little dark splotches on the edge of the pizza. I think that's really, really delicious. And now we're going to go with the final toppings here. The queso añejo, the squash blossom, and the cilantro leaves. Now what I have to do now, because it just seems so delicious looking here, is to use my little pizza cutter to cut out a little slice. Yeah, it's going to be kind of hot, but I just can't resist coming up. Oh, look at that beautifully browned crust underneath.